So thank you guys for showing up today. I'm going to give a little presentation. It shouldn't be too crazy long, but I just want to tell our story here. We have all the stuff out here for you guys to look at, ask questions about. We have a long history as a national fraternity, and we have a long history here on campus. So I'm going to start the presentation off talking a little bit our national founding, and then I'm going to go into our history at Cleveland State. It used to be Fenn College, and we used to be LTD. I'll talk a lot about that and how we changed into Sig Ep and how we became the chapter we are now. But first, I got to start us off with this guy right here. Our story starts off very humble. Carter Ashton Jenkins, that's the name of this individual. He's a name that you all should probably memorize because he's a very important player. He's our founder. And when he transferred to Richmond College in 1899, he was 18 years old. He transferred from Rutgers College to Richmond College, a school that only had 300 people, and I believe it already had 4 fraternities on campus. And he was at Rutgers, he was in Chi Phi, which is a really old fraternity. Don't know much about them, but he was already in Chi Phi when he transferred, and there was no chapter for Chi Phi at Richmond. So what he wanted to do was create a chapter at Richmond College. So he started meeting with some people. 6 people turned into 12 eventually. They started calling themselves the Saturday Night Club. They just kind of met every Saturday night. Nothing major. It wasn't until he finally decided, like, hey, I want to create a Chi Phi chapter here at Richmond. And you guys, I mean, you probably all know the deal with fraternities on campus. It was no different back then. Typically, fraternities were seen as, this group of guys who would go out and party all the time, not typically seen as something to be taken seriously even back then. And a lot of the 12, I think 7 of those 12 original members were training to be ordained ministers. So they really wanted something that would align with their values. And Carter, he assured them that it would, but eventually they were on board with it, but the national fraternity really turned them down because, again, only 300 students, and they already had 4 fraternities. They just figured it would be very difficult for them to grow. So some time went on, and eventually he said, screw it, I want to start something new. They started calling themselves, at first I believe they started calling themselves Sigma Phi. He eventually went to the faculty to get them officially recognized, and when there was some pushback and they said, what could we benefit from another fraternity on campus? Carter and a couple of the other founders met with faculty and they said, quote, this fraternity will be different. They said that it will be based on the love of God and peace through brotherhood. And that was kind of their selling point, that this fraternity will be different. We're serious about this. And like they obviously, again, 7 out of the 12 were wanting to be ordained ministers, and they really believed in its values and how it really aligned with them. So they were recognized shortly after that. In November, I believe it's November 1st, 1901, they officially were recognized at Richmond College and then worked later down the road to become a national fraternity. So that's just like a quick cliff notes on our national founding. But meanwhile, around 20 years later, here's the original 12. That's Carter. I wish I had a list of everybody else. It's all online. But Carter Ashton Jenkins is the original founder. This is the original 12 that established Sigma Phi Epsilon at Richmond College. But meanwhile, on another part of the country, Fenn College was sort of in its birthing years. Starting in 1881, it started off as a YMCA, educational branch. I'm not sure how many people actually know this, but we were, part of Youth Men's Christian Association education branch. And then it wasn't until the 20s when we actually started beginning to offer college-level courses. And then eventually went through a rebranding and changed our name to Fenn College. And then early student life started forming at Fenn College. By 1927, there were a couple clubs, drama club, debate club, There were 2 fraternities, mostly in business and things like that. We only offered a couple degrees. There was like there was engineering, business, and commerce, and that was it. But it was enough to call ourselves a college, instead of just an educational program. And then not long after, some of the student life started growing on campus. Not long after that was the founding of Lambda Tau Delta. And I know that this isn't SIGEP quite yet, but it's important to know what we were before we were SIGEP. And before we were SIGEP, we were considered a local fraternity, which is just like it's a smaller scale. It's only university, college level fraternity. It's not nationally recognized, but it's still significant on campus. And it was established in 1929 with 9 members, founded on principles of high scholastic achievements, which is something that we still value today. And something that will be very important when we decide what we eventually want to go to when we start to recognize or we start to associate with a national organization of what we kind of want our values to be. But yeah, it was founded on high scholastic achievements, scholars mostly, and it would soon undergo some very big changes in the coming years. So it's 1929 right now, and we just founded Lambda Tau Delta. Fenn College is in its early years. And then over the next couple of years, the country sees a lot of changes. So first off, during the Depression years, surprisingly, the school does pretty well. We're able to grow during the Depression years. It's around this time when we actually buy Fenn Tower from a struggling business. We actually are able to buy Fenn Tower during this time, and the campus actually starts to grow. So we make some pretty good decisions during these years. And then LTD also grows in manpower as well. It actually wasn't until World War II when LTD eventually closed down, because a lot of the men in the fraternity have to go out or are committed to joining the war effort, and eventually it has to close down temporarily because there's just no one in attendance. By 1946, immediately opened back up with 19 new members. So students started attending Fenn College again on the GI Bill, and this really helped LTD start back up with 19 new members, and then growth would persist after this well into the 60s. And then another important thing that happened in the 1960s was our official changing of Lambda Tau Delta into SIGEP. So at this time, a lot of fraternities are starting to associate and kind of be absorbed by larger national fraternities. And Lambda Tau Delta was one of the last ones to do this, but they figured it was time to jump on that train. And so they really look at what fraternity what fraternity kind of aligns with their values and their ideals. And they end up choosing SIGEP based on, they have high ideals of scholastic achievement. SIGEP was originally founded on the ideals of creating peace through brotherhood and strong relationships with God and things like that. And they determined on November 21st, 1964, officially, that that's what aligned the best with them. And it officially formed Ohio New as we know it today. So then after that founding, SIGEP Ohio New was pretty much in its heyday for the next 20 or so years, 20, 30 years. SIGEP grew along with the university. So the university continued to grow and expand. In the 1960s, SIGEP at CSU became pretty much the chapter to beat. We ended up growing to 100 members at one point in the 60s. And every year we start. There's the trophy here. I could talk a little bit about that now. That's the All Sports Trophy. That one's from, I think, 1966. So we started this tradition of winning this trophy every single year, and that kind of established our presence on the fraternity as this fraternity to beat at the time. And like Dave will say, like, the alumni would give them hell if for whatever reason they didn't win this trophy. So it was a big deal. Another big deal. In 1979, we became the first Northeast Ohio chapter to receive the Buchanan Cup. So Buchanan Cup is awarded to SIGEP chapters who have high achievement and are basically the top tier of chapters on their campus. And we became the first to get that in Northeast Ohio. I think Case Western followed shortly afterward. Yeah, and then we also got a fraternity house on 36th Street. So 100-year-old mansion. It's in the next slide here. This is an old picture of our fraternity house. Doesn't currently exist, but it was really nice to have. There's the sign that would hang up right here. This sign apparently got stolen or something like that, but this sign right here is actually the sign that was hung up around this area, and there's a picture of it being hung up, so there's a piece of history there. That's in the archives usually. All right, and then after our heyday sort of ended, starting in around the 80s, became sort of a downfall in campus participation in campus life, particularly Greek life. So Cleveland State became, by the way, I should also mention that during the 60s, one of the changes was Fenn College being rebranded into Cleveland State. Something I failed to mention, but you see here, Cleveland State became a commuter school in the 80s. So by the time the 80s rolled around, participation in Greek life and in campus life started going downhill a little bit. It was seen as less of a priority. Ohio New closed. Despite efforts to try and prevent that, it closed and remained dormant, and the fraternity house got sold and torn down, unfortunately, which always makes me sad because it was such a beautiful house. But unfortunately, yeah, just on account of residence life going down, became a commuter school. We ended up having to close for a while. But that's when sort of the heroes of their story kind of come into play. So Dave and Bill Schutte here, and this is a banner that we still actually have. Maybe one day we'll get it hung back up on that banister, but for now, these are the heroes of our story. So they were the very big names in our rechartering and recolonization. So by 2010s, CSU wanted to make efforts to kind of grow resident life, grow Greek life. And Dave Hewitt, Bill Schutte, and Parker Keating really were the biggest players in our recolonization in 2013. That eventually led to our rechartering in 2017. So the picture here, this is Parker Keating, Bill Schutte, and Dave, and then our rechartering president, Paul All. And he's filling out the request for a recharter in this photograph. And then these are the 40 members that we had during the rechartering period. So that's the requirement to get rechartered is you need, I think it's a minimum of 40 members or somewhere around there. And then you need SLC accreditation, you need a ton of other qualifications. And thanks to Dave, Bill, and Parker, and then Paul, we managed to get all that, and we managed to recharter officially in 2017. And then this was the rechartering class. I don't know if you guys recognize any of these people. A lot of them now are AVC volunteers. Like there's Keegan, Paul's up there. There's a couple faces. And yeah, that pretty much brings us up to the present.
Welcome to the first Sigma Phi Epsilon interview podcast. I'm Braden Geyer. I'm our current chapter president of the Ohio New Chapter. Today I'm here with our alumnus Dave Hewitt. Dave graduated in 1966 from Cleveland State and has been volunteering for over 20 years for Sig Ep. Welcome, Dave.
20, that's more like 50.
So why don't we just kind of kick it off? You kind of tell us who you are, your experience, and all of that fun stuff.
Well, we can start with the school. I came to Fenn College at the time, and my dad said, you're not going to go to Ohio State, we can't afford it. So you got to go to Fenn College, learn how to be an engineer. And I said, I don't want to be having to drive locomotives all over for the rest of my life. Didn't have no idea what an engineer was. And so I wound up getting into mechanical engineering, and that was the degree, and I never used it in my whole career. Never used it. Used more business and management skills rather than engineering. But it was a good background, a good base to go whatever direction you wanted to go in. So I was glad I did that. Glad I got into the co-op program here at Fenn College, and I was around in the early to mid 60s when the school was coming to become Cleveland State University. That was 1964, in December of 1964. So the 1965 class that we had was the last graduating class of Fenn College, and the 1966 class was the first class of Cleveland State University, and I was in that class. So that's another feather there that was in when the school switched names. And at about 3 weeks before the December 15th date of the transition from Fenn to Cleveland State, the Lambda Tau Delta fraternity, which was a local fraternity here at Fenn, switched to become a chapter, the Ohio New Chapter of Cleveland State. We were at the time chapter number 184, and in the spring of 1964, after we had elections and I became the chapter president, the first piece of business I had to tackle was that we were ready to go become a chapter in the spring of 1964, and our headquarters staff said, no, you're not ready because you're not financially sound yet. And we had too many of the brothers that owed too much money, and the way they did it was they would pile up the debt to the fraternity when they were in school. They would go out on co-op and get a paycheck and be able to pay off the debts. Well, that wasn't a thing that the headquarters would allow, so we had to set back the initiation and the installation of the chapter till the fall. And then that summer, our chapter controller was Ernie Krzenik, who was in Cincinnati most of his career, now down in Florida. Ernie and I worked together. I would come in from my job out in Elyria, and Ernie and I would get together on what we had to do to get the chapter ready for the fall. And it worked that the chapter all banded together, and we wound up on November 21st installing 41 LTDs, including our faculty advisor, who was Emil Perrault, and he was a 1942 graduate of Fenn College, and at the time he was the director of the metallurgy department at Fenn College. And so he became initiate number 1, I became initiate number 2. And prior to that, we had Doc Patterson, who was an advisor. Doc was second man in command at the university, and he eventually became the provost, and later on became provost emeritus. And Doc Patterson was supposed to be initiate number 1, And at the last minute, he was called to Columbus on Cleveland's Penn College to Cleveland State business. So he had to beg off. And so we never did get Doc initiated. That's one of the things that I missed doing, to getting him initiated as a SIGEP, which he agreed to do. So we, on November 21st, 1964, we became Ohio New. And we were pretty well set as far as being the fraternity that was expected to win the all sports trophy every year. And there were 5 basic trophies, and that, well, there was a Greek sing, the Queen, homecoming queen, homecoming float, the Greek sing, and the all sports trophy. Those 5 trophies, and we made a goal in that spring semester of gathering all of the remaining trophies, which we did. We were, for the first time in many years, we got the athletic or the academic scholarship for having the highest grades. So that year was a really transitional period for us, becoming a small local chapter to a larger chapter of a larger national organization, Sigma Phi Epsilon, headquartered in Richmond, Virginia. And that started my career with SIGEP as a volunteer for many, many years at different locations. I graduated in 1966 by hook and by crook, and joined General Electric. And that was a good year for graduations of engineers. I had, for example, 20 interviews for credible companies: Xerox, Eastman Kodak, Firestone, Ford, and so forth. And out of the 20, I had only one refusal that didn't want me, and that was Ford Motor Company. But I had 19 offers, and as one would come in, I had already an offer in my pocket, I would have to weed one out and work with the co-op department to make that transition, and finally picked General Electric. Went on a 3-year training program with GE, wound up in Indiana, North Carolina, upstate New York, Syracuse, and Schenectady, New York, and then wound up, after the 3-year program was over, I took a permanent position in Cincinnati with the aircraft engine group of General Electric Company, and they made the engines for the DC-10 aircraft and some of the fighter jets, and I also had a plant up in Boston, and my job was to transition from Cincinnati to Boston, and that wound up being waylaid, and I wound up at Cincinnati several years more than I thought, and I wound up there getting my master's or my MBA at Xavier University in Cincinnati, and then wound up getting transferred into Boston, where I spent 5 years with the GE smaller division aircraft engine plant up in Lynn, Massachusetts, north of Boston. And I really loved Boston. Being a single guy, it was the place to be at the time. And I really had a good time there with GE, but it became time to get away from manufacturing and get into marketing and sales. And I wound up going with Norton Company, which was industrial abrasives products in Worcester, Massachusetts. Spent a year there training, and then wound up by hook and by crook getting transferred back to Cleveland, Ohio. And that was the time where Cleveland State had grown that you didn't recognize it. I left before the first hole was dug for the, I believe, the science building. And so I missed all of that initial building of Rhodes Tower and so forth. And it completely changed the 24th Street and Euclid Avenue area. Set it on its ear. The goal was 20,000 students, going from probably 5,000 or 6,000 students at Fenn to 20,000 eventually, and I don't know if we ever made it there or not, but here we are today with about 15,000 students, I believe. So there's been a big transition with Cleveland and the city of Cleveland and Cleveland State, and got back and involved with the chapter and the university. Became on the board of directors of the Cleveland State Alumni Association. I've had a couple of terms there, and currently am on that board, and also got back and involved with the chapter. We had closed the chapter in 1990 and wound up, Bill Schutte and I got together and with a few other fellows and decided to try to reestablish the chapter at Cleveland State. This is the time when Mike Swartz had been in for a few years as president. They were doing the building of the dormitory, the Euclid Commons, restructuring of Fenn Tower for dormitories, and also the Student Center was on the books. So a lot of good transition things going on then with the university. So been on and off ever since. We wound up really starting the build up to the transition to reestablishing the chapter. We started that heavy duty in 2013, and it took another 4 years before the chapter was fully installed. And I'm back now and proud to see that the chapter has grown from they were initiated at 40 new chapter members when the recharter came about in 2017, and today we're back up to 40, and the goal is to have 50 at some point here this year. So that's good to see. And I said at the time back in 2014, or at our initial chartering in 1964, I said that we had picked the best national fraternity to go with, and that was Phi Epsilon. We had initiated or researched over 50 nationals, and it wound up coming down to about 10, then 2, and then Phi Epsilon and us seemed to be the best match on both sides, and we picked the best match, and I think they picked the best match too. So we brought in the Ballast Man program, which was no pledging, no emphasis on alcohol and the big parties and that. It was more of really a true fraternity experience for undergraduates. And I'm proud to see what Phi Epsilon has done on a national basis for its undergraduates. We really do a nice job there. And our undergraduates at Cleveland State are getting the benefit of that for all the programs, the Life After College, Carlson Leadership Academy, of course, the Conclave, and those types of programs really benefit all the chapters, including our Ohio New chapter here at Cleveland State. So on the personal side, I wound up marrying Sandy. She's a Cincinnati lady and a registered nurse. She wound up being with Cleveland Clinic here in Cleveland for about 30 years. And we're now both retired. I retired from computer hardware and software installation work. And so we're both enjoying the retirement, and it gives me a little more time to work with the chapter. We like what we see in Cleveland. The city of Cleveland has really gone the right direction, and we have a cleaner lake now. All the rivers running into the lake are clean, and that's my really reason for sticking around after retirement is the cleanliness of the environment and the fishing and hunting, which I love to do. So with that, any questions, Braden?
I mean, you kind of said a lot. Like the majority of my questions, you kind of answered in all one big thing. But I mean, just kind of going back to your time at Fenn College, going into Cleveland State, like what initially drew you to LTD?
Well, I had two. I graduated from Elyria High School. Elyria is my hometown, and came and lived in the dorm. I didn't commute in, and I had two fellas that had joined the LTD group from my hometown. They were in the high school class ahead of me, and they were the initial contacts. So there was that. Plus, I noticed that there was a mix of students there at the group. It wasn't all that. There were a lot of athletes, but they were athletes and academically challenged too, and which I was for sure. So it's now known as being a balanced man. So what I'm saying is, I think the LTDs were a balanced man chapter before they became SIGEP. We really had some good all-around guys that were good on athletics, academics, social type things, and like to have a good time, but like to be serious on certain things, especially the health of the chapter, plus their own careers. And a lot of them have gone on and done very well in their professional careers. So that's what drew me to the LTD group. At the time we didn't have a house. Later on we did rent a house over on Prospect Avenue. Prior to that, we had the rooms right across the street from the dorm, the Fenn College dormitory at the time, and then from there we went over to Prospect with a house. And finally after that, I don't know exactly what time, probably 67 or 8 after I graduated, then we bought a fraternity house on 36th Street. And that house was there until about 1990 when we closed the chapter. So today we have 4 fraternities. They're the same fraternities we had back in 1964. And they're still on board here at Cleveland State. And we're leading the pack there. So I'm proud to see that we made some good decisions when we were an LTD group, and all those guys in that charter group, we all graduated, all got our degrees from Cleveland State, and all went on to some pretty good careers. So that was the caliber of the guys that attracted me more than anything.
Was there any initial pushback to becoming our national fraternity, like now SIGEP?
There was quite a bit because we knew we had to knuckle down on especially the finances. We had to keep the dues payment up to date. You couldn't sit and run up a bill and then go out on co-op months later and pay your bill off. That was a no-no, and we had to live to that. And a lot of the guys didn't want to do that. A lot did not want to go. So we had to go on without them, unfortunately. And a few have come back later on. A few of the LTDs to become initiated as Renaissance. We had a 19-man graduating class of 1964, and that's the class we lost. And only one brother came back to get initiated, and that was Al Maricini, who was the president before me, and Al came back and got initiated at the 1967 conclave, which was held here in Cleveland. So Al was the only one to get initiated. I know Tom Naroda. Tom would be a good one. He's the one that brought SIGEP to the vote, and he did all the research on the different national fraternities we looked at. And so we made some good decisions back then, and some tough ones too. And tough ones were the ones that fellas that didn't, some really good guys that just didn't want to go with SIGEP. So we had to kind of leave them behind hopefully they're still with us. They still get our mailings if we know their email address, and we've got them listed as LTDs. So maybe someday we'll catch some more of them. We'll see.
What was it like officially getting our SIGEP charter in 1964? What did that kind of feel like to everybody?
Well, it was a goal. We had made it a goal that spring of 1964 when we were told we couldn't become a chapter then. We made it a goal to become a chapter in the fall, which we did, and it was a lot of work to get that done. A lot of travel time back and forth, and talking with guys about making sure they get their dues in on time, things like that. Similar to what you're seeing today with the chapter. And so it was a learning experience. I'm glad we went through it. I was proud to be a part of it, and I'd do it again for sure. So,
what would you say? I mean, you've had a long and successful career in engineering and everything that you were going towards for college. But what do you feel like SIGEP has kind of provided for you to prepare you for your future?
Well, being an engineer, I was not an engineer. I should have been in a business school, and it doesn't give you management skills or people skills, as they call it. It's more technical. You're designing a gear for a transmission at Ford Motor or General Motors, and that's or a glove box or a rear end design, and so that's your focus. And there are people involved as a team to do that, but it's really kind of limited. Your focus is on the technical hardware, software part of it. And so any business experience I got, speaking in front of crowds, speaking in front of people, running chapter meetings or business meetings, I learned that at SIGEP, with SIGEP. And my favorite testimonial to why SIGEP is the best is that the picture of if you picture a Marine Corps general standing there with his white hat and all of his medals sitting there, and the quote that's on there is, "Everything I learned about leadership in the military, I learned as being a member of SIGEP," and that was the 34th Commandant of the Marine Corps saying that, who happens to be a SIGEP. And so I believe in that too. That gave me the roundabout experience in the business world. I learned a lot from my co-op jobs, but mostly from my work with the fraternity and with our national.
So, I mean, obviously you've been around for a lot of challenges within the chapter. What would you say is the biggest kind of challenge that you guys have faced, and the reward of help, overcome that challenge?
Well, we're still challenged by the same challenge that we've always had, is getting the right volunteers for the right positions. And I'm hoping by really the key to SIGEP on a campus is the undergraduate chapter. And what we've experienced when we have rechartered was that whenever the chapter had a difficulty, we had to jump on it right now and help them out, help them kind of guide them to how to solve the problem, whatever it happened to be. And to do that, we've had to, I guess not neglect, but kind of leave out as kind of a lower priority our alumni programs. And as a result, we have lost involved or engaged members in the alumni board over the years, and we need to we need to look to get that back by providing more in the communications area for alumni and the social media. Bring that into the alumni area, and I think we can do that pretty quickly. We've got the 2 days of giving coming up. One is November 1st and 2nd for SIGEP, and the other one will be in February for Cleveland State. That's when we'll be populating our SIGEP LTD scholarship. And coming up this fall, here within a matter of weeks, we'll be helping the SIGEP Annual Fund, which funds all the programs for SIGEP, the conclaves, leadership academies, life after college, and so forth. And that's the chapter donations for that go right into that annual fund for that purpose. But the chapter does benefit, as do all the 200 other chapters, benefits from what we do there. So it's coming up on a pretty busy time for supporting our chapters, and I'm looking forward to it. Should be a couple of good fundraisers, if you will.
Yeah.
On the alumni side, and from that, I hope we can come along with, get a feeling for what our alumni would like to see, too. So we'll go to work on that.
Yeah, of course. On your span of volunteering for the chapter, I mean, what would you say is your most proud thing that you've contributed to help building, within the fraternity over the years?
Probably the scholarship. We have a SIGEP, Sigma Phi Epsilon, Lambda Tau Delta Endowed Scholarship in the CSU Foundation. And that now has 6 figures is the market value. So we can give out roughly $4,000 to $5,000 a year in scholarships. So we use that for scholarships for the chapter and expenses for conclaves and things like that. And also our Balanced Man scholarships that we give out to students coming in. And a lot of those students do join SIGEP, do join our chapter. So the scholarship, there's another scholarship that I helped to spearhead for Dr. Patterson. When he left, he never had a scholarship put in his name, but he was the first and only provost of Cleveland State University. He was the only provost of Cleveland State University, and then he became the first provost of Cleveland State, and he was the only provost of Fenn College. So he was quite prominent. He had every job in the university except president. And Doc Patterson never got the recognition, I think, when he retired via scholarship. So we were able to put that in place with the help of a lot of LTDs and SIGEP donations. So those 2 scholarships are the most proud of, I think I am, because they support undergraduates, many of whom are SIGEPs.
Wow, that's awesome. It's great to have those resources for all of our SIGEPs to use, whether it's our scholarships or those type of events. Closing it out here, my final thing, what kind of advice would you give to our alumni that may be a little resilient to, connect? Like, what is that kind of way that they can get reconnected with the chapter and what's going on?
Well, the way the volunteer organization for SIGEP is lined up now, it's called, the board's called, not an alumni board, it's called an AVC board. That's alumni and volunteers. So we would take in anybody, if we can't get volunteers from our own SIGEP or LTD group, they're just not stepping up here. We can bring in somebody that maybe has a particular expertise but doesn't happen to be a member of SIGEP. We can bring him in as a volunteer. So with that, we also have spots for volunteers that don't have a lot of time. For example, the ones that will probably be working on here shortly is volunteers who will be career counselors for some of the undergraduates, and to help them, point them in the right direction and help them get some research, suggestions on research on what's the best job to look at or best career. So those types of positions are, a lot of times they're one and done, or a lot of times you're a mentor or a career counselor over the phone. You can be in any part of the country or overseas and still be a career counselor because it's set up to be that way. So I'd say for our volunteers, our volunteer potentials out there, don't be afraid of getting overloaded, because we certainly don't want to see that happen. But put your 2 cents worth in. Talk to Paul All, our alumni president, or myself, or any of the ones, Bill Schutte, any of the ones that are involved, that to get a feel for what's available. But probably the career counselor is the biggest thing I think we can use that's not going to impact on an alumni time. It'd be a pretty small amount of time requirement. So that would be one that, if I were an alumnus, I would look at that. So
cool. Well, that's all I had for you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully that we can do a little bit more of these kind of interview type things with our alumni, our brothers, and kind of just, save our history of SIGEP and be able to tell other people all the different stories we have. So I appreciate you coming on here, telling us about your experience, your SIGEP experience, and do you have anything left that you would like to say?
Well, we all, I'll leave it with our alums, address the alums here. We all took a vow when we became initiates of SIGEP or LTD, and basically it was that we would be an LTD or a SIGEP for life. And I firmly believe in that we're there for life. And I see a lot of guys still getting together in their groups, individual groups. Let's bring them together with the chapter, as the chapter's been trying to do, and with some degree of success. So don't be afraid of sticking your nose in and getting involved to some extent, because it is your chapter. Ohio New is your chapter, and Cleveland State University is your university. And if you're don't sit back and just either complain or not, worse yet, not say anything. You can make an impact. One person can make an impact. So to the alumni, look to get involved, make some suggestions, and don't be afraid to take on a little volunteer job once in a while.